Hey guys, it's me Raj from California. I am at a place called Wrightwood, and Wrightwood is about an hour's drive from Lancaster. It is at about 6,000 feet. You can see some pines behind me. There you go. They got lovely pines here, and it's quite a change from Lancaster, which is a high desert. And I just come here to escape the heat of Lancaster. It's about 110 there. Can you believe? In the afternoon it was 110 and it's 65 here. They just had some thunderstorms and it's gone below 65 really now. Friends, this video is dedicated to asking a question of our Protestant churches. I've been discussing with Marty Corzad, our friend, who has placed wonderful videos exposing the deceptions of the fake Apostle Paul. I think this is the best angle where I get some sun, the dying sun, last rays really. Talking to Marty, he's wondering how long will it take before this deception of Paul is, goes to the public. Now just few people know through our videos. There's Whitmore, Mr. Hugh Whitmore, who's contending for this through his videos. He's exposing Paul since a few years. There's Mr. Del Tondo, Marty Corzad, yours truly, and there are a few others. But by and large, the people at the Protestant churches still go there and they get to hear Pauline deception, saved by grace through faith. And that's about it. They still do not know or possibly living in denial, and based on the promises of the pastors rather than the word. So through this video, I'm making an impassioned plea to the Protestant churches. After exchanging some emails with Marty, who's become my friend through this YouTube exposes of Paul, it occurred to me that if one church, one bigger church, Protestant church, if one of them were to accept that they were deceived, that Paul is indeed a deceiver and that they were deceived, be gracious enough to acknowledge that we were deceived. There's three questions which are going unanswered. They are pretty important and serious questions. They're the virtual theology of the Protestant churches, of whom I was a member, of course. I mentioned that many times before. Several years I have invested in Protestant church. Got all my education there. However, they are deceived. For those three questions are very straightforward. They are the ABCs. They cannot answer. How are we saved by grace when Jesus never uttered the word grace? Jesus never ever spoke the word grace in the entire Bible. Now, how can he save us by grace when he didn't even utter? That's a red flag way up, because Paul taught that, not Jesus. Okay? Nobody in the New Testament talks about saved by grace and all that, except Paul, the man who calls himself a crafty deceiver. 2 Corinthians 12:16 says, the crafty fellow that I am, I took you in by the churches in by deception or deceit. The same man also says in Romans 3:7, I am a liar. He says in 2 Corinthians 11 verse 9 that I am a robber / thief. Okay, so this man introduced us a new doctrine of saved by grace alone. Jesus never, shockingly, never ever used the words these pastors and teachers of Protestant churches have actually drenched us or pounded or peppered us with saved by grace alone, through faith alone. I'm sure you got a lot of that also, as I did. Now, sorry for the traffic. It's nice and cool up in the pines here. Beautiful fresh weather, fresher by the showers we've had now a few minutes back. So grace is, they have no answer, the Protestant churches. You can also ask your church, How are we saved by grace when Jesus never uttered the word grace? Shouldn't he have taught thousands, millions he taught in his 3.5 years ministry? He never ever uttered the word grace. Then think of it, guys. How will he save anybody by grace? Did he forget? Before crucifixion, after crucifixion, he came back. After resurrection, he could have said, "Oh Lord, I have missed teaching them saved by grace. Let me correct myself." No, nothing was spoken post resurrection. Nothing, or in the future times. So this is it's a red flag, huge red flag, way up, that Jesus never ever uttered the word grace. Now, moving on from there, the second question for the Protestant churches is this: how do you teach grace when Jesus not only did not teach grace, but he rejected saved by grace or faith? You know, guys, this justified by faith alone doctrine was again taught by Paul, not Jesus, who 7 times or 6 times at least on the Last Supper itself says, "If you love me, keep my commands. If you love me, obey me. Oh, if you love me, obey me. Not one of you will enter the kingdom of heaven," he wants. And then in Matthew 7:21, "unless you do the will of God." So he was all about obedience, and he rejected the Protestant doctrine of justified by faith alone. Again, on the last day of judgment, Matthew 25:31 to 46, the goats and sheep. It's a vision of the last day. It is not a parable. And Jesus told us very clearly, neither by grace nor by faith are you saved. It is only by works of loving kindness, compassion. He just wants altruists, the Good Samaritans. Okay, I won't go into all that. I put a lot of videos on all this. Please check them out. So he rejected both grace and he rejected saved by faith alone. So the question to Protestant churches is, what do you do now that you've taught filth, or in simple words you have taught something which is not true, that saved by grace alone or faith alone, both were rejected by Jesus on the day of judgment? Can you change pastors, teachers of Protestant churches? No matter how much they will argue, they cannot change the last day judgment scenario, which still remains the same. What does it say? Saved by works of loving kindness, or you're not saved at all. So check that out, Matthew 25:31, 46. I won't elaborate, but the Protestant churches cannot change that. So there goes to, there goes away their saved by grace and saved by faith. Neither was used. Jesus never taught grace, neither did he use faith alone on the day of judgment, which he gave on purpose to nail the deception of Paul, who tagged or who followed the Protestant churches. They shouldn't have. Beg your pardon, the Protestant churches followed Paul. They shouldn't have. They should have followed Jesus. The last question is, Paul also killed Father God's eternal law. Now, I won't go into that, but Psalms 111, 7 and 8, Psalms 19, 7 to 11, Psalms 119, 151, 152, several times David keeps on saying, it's forever and ever law, it's a just, perfect, holy law. How did this just, holy, perfect law and eternal law of God forever and ever, he calls it, suddenly end? Just because one man says, Paul, you're not under law, you're grace, it's a curse, he calls it. He calls it very bad things, and David calls it the opposite: magnificent, life-giving, honey dripping from a honeycomb, those kind of things. Check out Psalms 19, 7 to 11. So who's lying? David, or is it Paul? Or is it Jesus, or is it Paul? Because Jesus says it's eternal, forever and ever. He concurs with David. Says that in Matthew 5, 17, 18, Luke 16, 17, and Matthew 4, verse 4. Man does not live on bread, but on every word which proceeds from the mouth of God. Okay, you got these things, guys. Now the question is, when the law is not dead, we were taught it is dead. It is for an ever law. Jesus taught us how to obey it in its entirety. Where does he say? Matthew 5. I beg your pardon, Matthew 22, 37, 40. Love God with all your heart, might and soul. Love the fellow neighbor or the human being as yourself. When you do that, you obey the entire law and the teachings of the prophets. If the law is dead, why is he telling us to obey it through this, through love, loving kindness? And that's exactly he used on the day of judgment. Matthew 35, 41 to 25, 31 to 46, the goats and sheep parable, or the judgment day vision is a better phrase because it's not a parable. So all this is rejected. The law is forever. We were taught it is dead. We are under grace. Jesus never taught the word grace. Neither did he use on the day, neither will he use on the day of judgment. Matthew 25, 31, 46, goats and sheep. And finally, the eternal law is not dead. It's forever and ever. And justified by faith alone doctrine, the popular doctrine of the churches, Protestant churches, who tagged Paul, was cast aside by Jesus, thrown away. He tossed it out of the window. All this being said, I hope this video goes to the Protestant churches, because I'm going to ask a very serious question of them. Guys, how long will you teach deception? All these things are not going to work out. Saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. The great sola fide doctrine was rejected by Jesus himself. How long, guys? I'm sure you must have seen Marty's videos, pastors, teachers. You're not blind. I'm sure you've heard of these messages. Some of mine, some of Mr. Del Tondo has put so many. And then there is Hugh Whitmore, who's been contending for years. So I'm sure you're getting a drift that of the fact that you were deceived. Here is the important question. One of you, if you are gracious enough to acknowledge that you were deceived, just one of you, if you come forward and accept and acknowledge that you were deceived, you will set the whole dominoes coming, crashing down. The domino effect will take place. Eventually, churches, which they should, stop dispensing this deception of Paul, start teaching Jesus. This is the impassioned plea of mine. But for that, somebody has to, one big church has to accept that they were deceived, and there was a mole, there was a goon, there was a bad guy, a scoundrel. His name was, there was a devil in Bible, New Testament, like there was in the Old Testament in the Garden of Eden. There was Satan sitting inside. What was he doing there? Similarly, Paul was permitted, allowed, so that we could be tested, and we stumbled. Coming back to you Protestant churches, if one of you is gracious to accept that yes, we did get deceived by this devil Paul, Saul the brutal, murderous Pharisee, blaspheming Pharisee, then the dominoes effect will come into play, All the churches will go down then. I don't want the churches to go down. Please don't misunderstand me. I want this doctrine of deception of Paul to go down. So what happens? That Jesus' doctrine comes to the fore. It gets stopped. So what is Jesus' doctrine? Turn away from sin, turn to what? Loving kindness. See, all his top 3 commands, and I will request you to check them out. Matthew 22, 37, 40. Matthew 7, these are the top 2 commands. Then he says, I gave you a new command. That's John 15, 12. On the Last Supper, he gave a new command. Love each other as I have loved you. So the top 3 commandments of Jesus revolved around love. And now I'll take you quickly to the last day, judgment, 25, 31 to 46, Matthew. The only criteria or the metric he used was to save or condemn was works of loving kindness. This cannot be changed, guys. So churches, if you're listening to this, I beg you, literally, I can't fold my hands because I'm holding my glasses and the phone. But think of me, I'm folding my hands in front of you and begging you. I'm ready to fall at your feet. I'm a very humble man. Please stop teaching Paul, except that you were deceived like we were all. Grace lies in accepting the truth and then turning away from sin, or that deception in this case, to what? The words of Jesus. Teach Jesus. Think about it, churches. Who's teaching Jesus? 95% or almost all of these churches are teaching Pauline deception, Pauline doctrine, which is deception. 95% is good, mixed with some terrible arsenic-like, verses, like God's law is dead, you're under grace. He adds a little bit of poison to all his teachings. Marty catches them very well. Del Tondo also catches them very well. Hugh Whitmore catches them very well. If I may, I feel awkward mentioning myself, but some of that I mentioned in my videos as well. So guys, coming back to the Protestant churches, I beg you guys, accept, even if one of you accepts that you were deceived, then what happens is others will do the same thing. It's like, you know, the domino effect. One has to go take the lead and be gracious enough to accept, and all will fall in line. All will fall, not fall, they will fall in line. And then we'll have a new era of what? Jesus' teachings after 2000 years. So my plea is this to all churches, all the Protestant churches, especially the bigger ones, please acknowledge that we were deceived. And when you say that, it will be there will be a flutter in the society. Yes, we have to brace for that. We have to accept it. It will cause a lot of headlines on newspapers and stuff, but then the truth of Jesus will come to the fore. Thank you guys for listening. Hope you will take the step as requested. God bless you all.